Hi guys, welcome to another edition of Behind the Sawdust, our weekly-ish vlog about what goes on when the cameras are off here at the Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal shops. It's actually been pretty quiet lately, at least on the production side of things. It's because we got so buried with the preparations for other upcoming events. In fact, we had to take the August and September issue and combine the two, which will release as a double issue after WIA in mid-September. I hated doing that, but it's the only way we're going to be able to get things done. I'm calling the next month from now until that issue release Hell Month. I got the idea from the grueling part of the training that U.S. Navy SEALs go through. They call it Hell Week, and I like to think that what I do is at least as hard as becoming a Navy SEAL, as my steely gaze and manly physique proves. Like I told you in the last episode, I'll be at the International Woodworking Fair in Atlanta next week. Then I'm doing a book signing in the Detroit area. Then after that, I'm teaching classes at Woodworking in America, and finally another book signing in Chicago. But it's not the events that take up the most time, it's the preparations. Take IWF, for example. At IWF in Atlanta next week, I'm going to be meeting Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal subscribers and fans of what we do, but I also am there to showcase the products of the sponsors that are footing the bill. I can't just stand around looking handsome, posing for photos like I did the last time I was in Atlanta for the Video Woodworkers booth. I have to be doing something that shows how I use my Joburg's workbench and my Tormek sharpening system. No big deal, right? I mean, I use those things all the time. But it's different when you take them out of my shop and put them in the world's largest woodworking show. I get a little bit nervous. What am I going to do that'll be interesting to watch live? I can't build jigs because I won't have a table saw. I can't build hand tool projects because it's just not practical to get all of those expensive tools there and keep them safe. So I've been spending a lot of time trying to figure out what would be the best project to make, which would showcase the features of both the workbench and the sharpening system, would require a minimum number of tools, and would be interesting to watch and talk about with the crowds that I'm sure are going to flock to see me. I mean, after all, there's going to be a 9-foot tall banner with my big fat face on it. That's sure to draw crowds. So I decided to learn wood carving. Yes, I decided to take on an entirely new skill over the course of just a few weeks, just to keep the masses entertained at WIA. That's dedication. I'm not an expert by any means, but I can do enough to impress the ladies, and it's an ideal task for showcasing the bench and the sharpening system. How else am I going to keep all those gouges sharp? I don't have time to learn sharpening and carving. Luckily, the Tormek's pretty much idiot-proof. With just one little jig, I can sharpen all the tools. So I signed up for Mary May's online carving school, and I learned to cut dogwood blossoms in basswood. I made a lot of mistakes, but I managed to rework the design and incorporate them, so it came out fine. And that was it. One lesson was all I had time for. I made myself a diploma, had a party, officially labeled myself a wood carver. But what am I going to carve at WIA? I can't just carve dogwood blossoms all day, every day. That'd get pretty old fast. And while it would showcase the capabilities of the Tormek, it doesn't do a whole lot for the workbench. I needed something that would incorporate a few woodworking tasks into my wood carving. So I got out some old reclaimed pine car siding that I've been saving for the last 60 years, and I started cleaning it up for milling. I always think better when I'm brushing cobwebs and mouse turds off old lumber. Of course, that's not the only reason I use my fancy triple laminated wire brush on rough lumber. I also do it because it gets rid of all the grit that would otherwise dull my jointer and planer knives. Well, it didn't take long before I was marking out all the good pieces and lost in the moment. My worries just carried away in a light cloud of floating rodent poo. I knew what I was going to make. Boxes. But not just any boxes. Carved boxes. And not just any carved boxes. Carved wine gift boxes. Everybody likes wine, right? And the only thing better than a nice bottle of wine is getting one as a gift. The only thing better than getting one as a gift is getting it in a nice gift box, handmade from antique reclaimed pine that has been cleaned of all traces of feces. So I milled up a bunch of boards, and since I won't have access to a table saw at the show, I decided to cut all the parts to size in my shop. We'll put together a video about how these boxes were designed and went together for the August-September issue. Anyway, these types of sliding lid boxes are usually put together with simple rabbet joints, but I wanted the process to be more interesting for the folks at the show to watch, so I decided to dovetail them. I wanted to make one ahead of time so that I could sit it on the bench and people there would see it and they know what the heck I was making. Plus, my hand-cut dovetail skills are a little out of practice lately, so I needed the warm-up. Anyway, I dovetailed the 4 corners, only messing up 3 of them, and it occurred to me that I would also have to cut grooves for the top and bottom panels. How am I going to do that at the show? I don't want to have to take another tool like a plow plane or a router plane. So I decided to cut all the grooves on the parts ahead of time. For this, I used my ready-to-route automatic fence and lift. No, they're not a sponsor. I just love the thing. And I thought it was a little ironic to be using a high-tech computerized router to cut grooves in antique pine for an old-timey hand tool project. That's what irony means, right? Or does it mean entirely made of iron? So I routed all the parts and shrink wrapped them into small bundles so that the moisture changes won't cause them to cut between now and when I actually use them. You can't cut good dovetails on stock that isn't flat. And even though I dovetailed 1 box in the shop, I plan on dovetailing the rest at the show. Now, for the carving, I decided to do a grape design on the lid. For these, I used thick basswood because it's easy to carve and it still looks like pine. Choosing grapes may have been a mistake though. They are a lot of work. This design is way more complex than my dogwood blossoms. It took about 8 or 10 hours to carve just 1 lid. I don't know how many actual hours of carving time I'm going to have at the show, but that seems like too much if I want to get 2 or 3 boxes made. So I may have to simplify the design. Maybe I'll do some leaves and just cut out the grapes, or maybe some flowers. I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, I got my test box finished, so I knew exactly what tools I was going to need to take, and I started piling them on my bench, hoping they'd all fit in the small crate. It took some creative packing, but I managed to get it all in. I was uneasy about putting some of the expensive tools in the crate. I would have preferred to carry them on the plane with me, but ever since those terrorist woodworkers tried to hijack the plane with the dovetail saw, you know how security can be. So I shrink wrapped the whole thing and drove it to Affinity Tools, the distributor for Tormek and Schobergs. They happen to be only 2 hours from my house. They'll ship it with their stuff over to Atlanta for me. Now, that covers the preparations for IWF, besides for the mundane stuff like packing extra silk boxers and getting my malaria vaccine. For us Northerners, going down to Atlanta is like traveling to Rio. But I do hope to bring back some gold medals and maybe a few good stories that I can tell you in our next episode. In the meantime, be sure to support our sponsors who make it possible for us to produce this and all of the other woodworking goodness over at Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal. You'll find links to their websites in the notes below the video, and if you click on them all, you can sit back, have yourself a cold one, because you earned it, my friend.